"And you," she said, turning to Sam, "for this is what you folk would call magic, I believe, though I do not understand clearly what they mean, and they seem to use the same word for the deceits of the enemy. But this, if you will, is the magic of Galadriel. Did you not say that you wish to see elven magic?" This is a quote from the Fellowship of the Ring, when Galadriel tells Frodo and Sam that she doesn't understand what exactly magic means, as it is used by the hobbits. And indeed, this quote may be applied to Tolkien's works as an overall theme of magic, and what some would deem magic, others would define as everyday life. In this series, Building a World, we explore what ideas and motifs Tolkien used to create his legendarium, and in today's video we will be discussing how Tolkien uses the classic idea of magic. So, does Tolkien use magic as a driving force in his works? Well, kind of. He uses it in a light manner, and almost not at all if he can help it. This may surprise some people, as it seems that this piece of fiction that redefined literature as we know it is filled with magic and fantastical artifacts. And though some of that does indeed exist within our world, again, magic really isn't a large part of Tolkien's legendarium. If we look at other well-known fantasies such as The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis or Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling, we see a more free-handed use of what people define as magic. Most contemporary readers see magic as mystical spells, powers, and unexplainable beings and events, but it's far vaster and more detailed than just that. And it's not used as much as it is in other books and fantasies. In my last Building a World video, I explained how Tolkien uses a structural outline of a frame narrative to tell his stories. Please watch that video if you haven't yet, as it really ties into this one. Ultimately, our stories are told through the writings and edits of primarily Bilbo and Frodo Baggins in the Red Book of Westmarch. Bilbo wrote There and Back Again, and he compiled the Silmarillion with notes from Rivendell, and Frodo wrote most of the Lord of the Rings. Thus, because Frodo and Bilbo are hobbits, and the youngest of the races of the Free Peoples, they cannot explain how wizards or elves complete some of their tasks and deeds other than using the ambiguous term of magic. So when we look at the elves, Elrond's gift of foresight, Galadriel's mirror, and Glorfindel's spirit that exists both in the Wraith world and the mortal realm are wholly unexplainable to the hobbits, so they deem it magic in the novels, and something neither the characters or the readers can really understand. My thoughts would be that the elves are able to use these gifts and skills through the powers of their own spirits, or Fëanor, and technology. Celebrimbor crafted the 3 elven rings through his own skill and spirit, and thus abilities were enhanced and given to the elves and wizard that bore these rings. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't any magic in Tolkien's universe, as the elves are still able to use metaphysical skills to enhance their own realities, like Galadriel using her ring and elven magic to create and maintain Lothlorien, and Elrond for being able to see somewhat into the future with a gift of foresight passed from his ancestor, Melion the Maia, and for his famous flood that he creates outside of Rivendell to stop the Black Riders from pursuing Frodo. This would be called magic by the hobbits, and something that's pretty unexplainable to us, the readers. The elves are granted some skills like this, as they, in and of themselves, are fantastical beings, both immortal and wise beyond measure. And of course, magic exists in the wizards of Middle-earth. Their magic is even harder to explain than the elves, but I believe it truly comes from their powers as Maiar, which are demigod-like beings in our legendarium, and because they directly serve the Valar, or gods, themselves. I think that their power comes from the Valar who sent them to Middle-earth to serve in the Third Age, such as Manwë and Elbereth giving appropriate power to Gandalf to advise and fight when need be. Obviously, these wizards have some sort of power that cannot be explained by any hobbit or the reader, but I believe that's the intent. Tolkien knew that magic was ambiguous, so he left it ambiguous in his story. There are items, too, that appear to be magical within the Legendarium, like the Plantiri, which allow communication from far away, or the Doors of Durin that open when the password is spoken, and so forth with many other items and relics. These artifacts are different in terms of the use of magic, as it seems the crafter of these items imbued them with special skill, giving them their powers, which again is pretty ambiguous overall, as we don't know where these powers originate within the characters who made these artifacts. But I believe Tolkien liked items more than everyday beings to be imbued with magic, as these items serve a single purpose or a single master, and nothing else. It serves to make the narrative writing more straightforward and clean, rather than leaving plot holes. Oaths and premonitions also have their places in the Legendarium, and they serve to drive our characters to make certain actions. Oaths taken by characters like Feanor and his sons, or the men of Dunharrow, bind those characters to a certain fate, and those fates do find them one way or another. Feanor's sons recovered the Silmarils as they promised, though it cost them so many lives and even their own lives and morality. And the men of Dunharrow were bound to be cursed spirits until helping Aragorn and Gondor fight against Sauron. Oaths are, in a sense, magic, and they follow a very classic and ironic storytelling that may be found in Old Nordic and Shakespearean literature, that which I'm sure inspired Tolkien. If we look at magic in the prophetic sense, Faramir and then Boromir's dreams strengthen the archetypal journeys of our characters, especially the hobbits and Aragorn. These dreams almost frame their stories in a prophecy. Every story in Tolkien's Legendarium uses magic a little bit differently. Because the Silmarillion was at the beginning of time and served as a genesis to Tolkien's world, magic and sorcery are used more here than in his later works. There is shapeshifting and illusions that occur to further plot points. In The Hobbit, magic is used more heavily than its successor, as it was made for children and served as an account of the first Hobbit to go on an adventure outside of the Shire. And The Lord of the Rings uses magic in the most conservative way out of all of Tolkien's tales, in my opinion, as The Lord of the Rings tells of the diminishing of elves and days of magic and wonder, and the rise of men to the days more akin to ours today. There are some hints of magic and mysticism as Elrond uses his powers to heal Frodo, and Aragorn uses his skill to heal Éowyn, Faramir, and Merry. Healing is one of many skills used in The Lord of the Rings, but it is a good example of magic used conservatively to tie more current days back to the Elder Days, as this kind of healing was done by Aragorn and Elrond's ancestors, like Luthien in the First Age. It makes sense that magic and the power of the Valar and Maiar would diminish and that machinery in its place would rise. But all the same, if we look at Tolkien's Legendarium as a whole, magic is used far less than in other pieces of fantasy. Magic is meant to be used as an aid for those to improve their environments and items, like Galadriel to Lothlorien, or Gandalf breaking the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. And sorcery is used to corrupt and dominate others. If we look at the Witch King, while he was in Angmar, being able to send out fell spirits to raise Barrow-wights from the Barrow Downs, that would be considered sorcery. According to Tolkien's letter numbered 155, he talks about the two different types of magic, magia and goetia, as Tolkien refers to them. He says that, quote, both sides use both, but with different motives, end quote. Magia serves as the physical type of magic, and goetia as the conjuring and mental type. Even after a more conservative use of the term magic, Tolkien still feared he used it too freely in his writings, and too ambiguous, which, depending on the reader, may be true and may not be. In my opinion, Tolkien did a great job of using magic in his works. It was used enough for a fantasy story, and remains an enigma to both the hobbits who wrote the stories and us, the readers, but it's still not used enough to damage the coherence of the narratives. I personally like that it's not used more than by primarily wizards and elves, and by Aragorn on occasion, as that makes the willpower and the sacrifices of the pragmatic situations in the story all the more heartfelt and real. So why does Tolkien try to avoid most ideas of magic? I think it's because it seems to be an easy and inexplicable way to solve problems in a narrative, whereas Tolkien wants the characters to find their own courage to fight, even against odds that seem overwhelming, and through their sacrifices, come out on top. Thank you all so much for watching. This was a very fun and interesting video to think about and create, and I really appreciate the opportunity. As there are many magic-related moments in the Legendarium, I was not able to cover them all, but I hope this video gives a broader sense to Tolkien's magic as a whole. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It really helps the channel and the video. Share this video with a friend who you think might enjoy it, and subscribe to stay up to date on my future videos about the Legendarium. Let me know your thoughts about how Tolkien uses magic. Do you like it, or should it have been different? I really enjoy seeing what you guys think. Join us on Facebook through the link in the description below to contact me more directly, and as always, thank you all for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my friends.